Hello and welcome to this, the penultimate episode in our series with the Royal Highland and Agricultural Society of Scotland. Next week for episode 14, we're finishing off exactly where we started with a chat with Highland Society Chairman Bill Gray and Chief Executive Alan Laidlaw. 3 months on, they'll be telling us what they can about what plans are being put in place to keep the Society going through these uncertain and difficult times. It will be essential listening for anyone interested in the future of the Society and the Royal Highland Show.
It's been a really tough year. We're not going to have an easy spell for the next wee while, and there's never been a better time to sort of get in behind us.
We can make plans as much as we like, but ultimately if the First Minister or one of her cohorts stands up on a Wednesday or a Thursday and says something, the landscape all of a sudden changes again.
This time, though, we're devoting a whole episode basically to saying thank you. There are plenty in rural Scotland and in the food and drink economy who've gone above and beyond, scrambling to keep their communities fed, to give an extra push for charity, or just continuing on with their jobs in difficult or unusual circumstances. This is a roundup of 6 stories. It's not even the tip of the iceberg of people who deserve thanks, so please just treat it as a starting point. Perhaps there are people out there who you'd like to thank. Please do tweet them using the hashtag #unsungheroes. We have a fab GIF on our Twitter, which is @on_farmuk, which you can share and tag somebody who deserves that thanks. First up for us is someone who represents all of the farm gate services, so farriers, contractors, and in this case, vets.
My name's Kath Dunn. I'm a veterinary surgeon. I work for Galedin Vets and based primarily at the moment in the Kelso branch. I'm 100% farm animal vet.
And Kath, you are also a director of the Royal Highland and Agricultural Society of Scotland, is that right?
Yes, I've just been asked to come on as a one-year director for the next session, 2021, for Borders region. So that's quite an exciting new challenge and something I'm looking forward to. A big honour to be asked to be involved with the Society.
So how has it been for you since March when this all happened?
Ironically, I was actually in self-isolation before lockdown happened because unfortunately my husband Gordon was really quite ill the week before lockdown. My daughter was then ill and we obviously didn't know at that point whether it was COVID or not, but we had to do the self-isolation, so I was kind of locked down here, and thankfully my son and I were fine and we got through it, and husband's fine. But then it was just back to work as normal because obviously COVID hitting right at lambing and calving time, the farm animal side just had to go on as normal. There were a few jobs that we could, put aside, unnecessary, sort of routine blood sampling, monitoring things. But, our main spring work is calving and lambing, and, we just had to just to get on with the same, and work with our farmers as we do. Thankfully this year, after a very wet start to the spring turned out to be, one of the better ones weather-wise. So that made a massive difference to how people's, calving went, how lambing went, and just how spirits were. So everybody was, getting on and getting through it with good heart, It was a bit strange having to do a C-section on a cow in the middle of the night with full PPE on, because obviously you're getting up close and personal with farmers when you're, doing cesareans, etc. And I wouldn't say it's the most comfortable thing in the world to have masks on when doing a lot of farm work. But, we tried our best to stick to the rules and tried to, socially distance where we could. And I think farmers, did appreciate that. And, hopefully people have become more aware of where their food comes from and how important, when things were getting low in the shops, and realise how valuable the food chain is, and how, keeping food flowing is so crucial, and how it can change so very quickly when there's something that interrupts that, chain of supply.
We've seen a huge surge, haven't we, in, people buying local beef boxes or cheese products or whatever. And of course, all of those products rely on vets and various other people within that supply chain. So if we can get a bit more of an understanding from the general public as a result of this, then that will be the silver lining on the cloud, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope that people, who have supported their local butchers and their local, farms, farm shops, etc., continue to do that, because it's like all the local businesses, if we don't use them, then, we don't have them there. And I mean, I work, I say, out of Kelso, which is a real market town. It still has its farmers market, which is generally well supported anyway. But, there's quite a lot of our local farms are now, selling direct, from the farm gate. And, I just think it's great, if people continue to realise how important it is, that they do support these things.
You sound really passionate about the farming industry, and it sounds as though you're proud to be part of that and to help and be a central cog in the wheel of keeping this amazing produce on people's plates. Is that right, or have I put words in your mouth?
Yeah, well, you maybe know, obviously, that I'm married to a farmer anyway, so there's not much rest from farming. It kind of consumes one's life, go around sorting people's problems all day and then come home and try and sort the ones here. But no, I mean, farming is in my blood. My father and father before were farmers, and my husband and maybe my son, will come on. So, we are farming people. It's what we do. It's what we breathe. It's what we, it is your way of life. And I've always, it sounds a real cliche. Whenever I was wanting to go to vet school, I wanted to be a farm vet. I didn't want to just be a vet. I wanted to be a farm vet. It was what I was going to do. So I feel very privileged and lucky that I've been able to follow that career exactly as I had hoped it would be. You are an unsung hero as far as I'm concerned, not just in COVID, but my interaction with vets has been through the horsey world largely. The bedside manner that I have encountered through the veterinary sector has been so much better than the bedside manner for any doctors I've encountered. I mean, and they've just been superb, and sometimes it's really tough times, in most of the time they're coming to do vaccinations, but sometimes they come to do a fairly nasty job, and they're dealing with clients in streams of tears, and yet they're always so superb at it, at their job. So I'm forever grateful, and I think everybody listening will be very grateful for their vet. Oh, you're very welcome. I better not make any comment on doctors' bedside manner, because I actually have an older sister who's a doctor, and we have regular arguments about who has the bedside manner that's better. So we'll just leave it at that. But thank you for your kind comments.
Many thanks to Kath Dunn. As a reminder, this episode is a selection box of 6 quite different conversations, all with people whose only connection to each other is that we think that they're people who we need to say thank you to. People in food and farming who, in one way or another, went above and beyond during coronavirus lockdown. And next up, we have a haulier.
So I'm Kerry Roberts. If you hear a dog barking, that's my dog Rab. I work for my family business, Ian Roberts Transport. Our main job is moving potatoes for a major supermarket. So we collect the potatoes in boxes from farms around Scotland and then take them down to distribution centres in England. Yeah, so, I mean, the only thing we can compare it to is Christmas. But there wasn't the warning that you would usually get with Christmas. Before there was ever a lockdown, obviously, the supermarkets kind of went empty. And I think what it was like, after the rice and pasta sold out, the next thing people seemed to go for was potatoes. So it was kind of almost overnight. One week we went from being normal to the next week the demand had doubled.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you cope with that? Because as you say, when it's Christmas, you can plan, you can have strategies in place, you can have staff ready. How did you cope with this almost overnight rush in demand for what you were doing?
Yeah, well, the first week was probably the most difficult. But then after the virus kind of became more serious, what happened was other sections of the haulage industry became more quiet. So we were lucky that there were other companies that we could subcontract our work out to, which was obviously quite good for us and for them.
Yeah, so you were keeping busy, keeping the income going, but then also providing work for people who otherwise might have seen their sector just kind of, as you say, go dead overnight. And it must have been challenging in other ways as well, though. I mean, because you've got this increased workload, you're bringing on new people, so that's more people to manage. But it would have been challenging in different ways because you also had, or your drivers would have had rules to stick to that they hadn't had before. And presumably also, they would have been difficult for them to access, food out on the road and things like that because, a lot of cafes and places were closed. So How did they manage that?
They seem to manage the change in rules okay. Because their job, they don't really have to come face to face with people normally anyway. That wasn't too much of a challenge for them. But the lack of facilities was definitely a big issue. That's something that's a kind of an issue normally for them. So to have the services all completely closed was difficult, and that meant that they had to plan themselves. It was quite hard because obviously we're telling them wash your hands, and the media is saying wash your hands. But even at petrol stations fueling up, they were just speaking through a window. There was literally no place to wash their hands going up and down the road. So I would say that was probably the biggest struggle for them, like no showers, no hot food. They were lucky that because we do the same routes, they're able to plan a bit more. And I can imagine for other drivers that weren't always doing the same runs, that must have been very difficult for them.
Yes, because they're getting the rules coming in one ear, but actually then they don't necessarily have the facilities with them, so that it's difficult to abide by it. And now I know that some of your regular drivers, you had one shielding, I understand, and then somebody else was a potential COVID case. So that must have meant that the drivers who were kind of fully operational must have been working really hard and really kind of going above and beyond the usual requirements.
Yeah, definitely.
So can you tell me a bit about them and how they've coped?
Yeah, so when I've asked them, they were definitely starting earlier, finishing later, and obviously the government did relax the drivers' hours, which we kind of gave them the choice themselves, whether or not they wanted to use the extra leeway. But yeah, it was definitely longer days for them, longer drives for them.
And I understand that you're in charge of health and safety, is that right?
Yeah.
You were presumably working harder than ever yourself as well, so everybody must have pulled together. How
definitely.
did you find it?
It was like 1 week the demand doubled, and then the next week we all kind of thought, oh, we better, have procedures in place to keep everybody safe. So yeah, it was definitely a bit more stressful. Everybody had to come together. I mean, like the supermarket we worked for, the drivers, us, we were all definitely working together. But yeah, like I say, it was just kind of being unprepared and kind of having to almost figure it out overnight.
Now, I don't think you're going to like this phrase, but we're using it quite a lot in this episode of the podcast, and it is unsung heroes, because whether you like it or not, people were desperate for flour and pasta and potatoes and many other things, and none of us would have got any of our groceries if it wasn't for you and your drivers. Even if you don't take that label yourself, which I think you should, you must think that about your drivers, that actually they've kind of really gone above and beyond, and that they deserve credit. Obviously we're all out there clapping for the NHS, quite rightly so, but there are many other people there who are other types of unsung heroes who deserve some credit. What do you think about your drivers in that case?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they did all go above and beyond, and like you say, the rules got changed that usually you could only drive 6 days in a row, but some of them were driving 7 days in a row because obviously the rules had changed. But it's actually been really nice, because I would say that the public seems to have kind of become more aware of the job that lorry drivers do. One of the places we go, the drivers have to go through a village, and this lady phoned and said that she was from this village. So my mum took the call, and she's thinking oh no, they're going to complain. And the lady just said, please tell your driver thanks for driving so slowly through the village, and thank you for keeping the supermarket's shelves stocked. That's never happened. We've never had anything like that before, in 20 years. It's a shame that it did take a pandemic for the kind of recognition to happen, but it's definitely really nice. I don't think people always realised, if we ever got complaints saying your vehicle's huge and it's coming through my village or my town, and I don't think those people always realise that it's going to your shop.
And that's what this episode is all about. There are so many people, vets, farriers, hauliers, you name it, who are underpinning the agricultural industry. These potatoes don't just fly onto the shelves. Somebody's got to grow them, and somebody's got to get them there. So I think it's really heartwarming.
Yeah, I definitely feel now like after seeing the shops go empty, people now realise the job that, tractors and lorries do.
Thanks to Kerry Roberts. All over Scotland, farm shops, cafes, delis and food businesses changed the way that they sell food, doing doorstep deliveries to make sure that people shielding can get the food they need without leaving the house. Our next conversation is with someone, Ellie Sinclair from Aberdeenshire, who runs a company called VegCo,